basically. So that makes like being freelance like 1,000 times better. And yeah, it's a client through somebody. I'm doing work for somebody else. So it's similar to a job of you're doing work for somebody else. And then for me, an indie developer is you're working for yourself, building like your own application. So this could be your own SaaS or product. But yeah, right now I'm working on my own iOS app, and that's like my indie developer part.
Things get prioritized. The product manager, I also have an engineering manager. So they just figure out what the product needs as of this point and what could be shipped till the timeline of the next release.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Drew, and welcome to the Kodeco Podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here's the show.
This is the Kodeco Podcast. This episode was recorded on Sunday, the 10th of March, 2024. I am your host, Drew Freeman, with my ever-effervescent co-host, Jennifer Bailey.
Thanks, Drew. Today on the show, we have Bhagat Singh and Mikaela Caron. Bhagat is an iOS engineer at PhonePe in Bangalore, India. He has been a member of the Kodeco team for more than half a decade now, contributing all around in books, articles, and boot camps. He also organizes Swift meetups in his area and is also a speaker at quite a few of them. Mikaela is an independent iOS developer, building her own indie apps and doing freelance work. She shares her developer experience on social media, speaks at conferences, and organizes the monthly online meetup called iOS Dev Happy Hour.
Mikaela, Bhagat, welcome to the show. Thank you so much. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention Mikaela also is a podcast host as well. Swift Over Coffee.
Swift Over Coffee.
With the true guru of Swift, Paul Hudson. So that was a heck of a catch there. I definitely recommend that show. It's great fun. So we're basically taking this from the point of view of having somebody who is very ingrained in the corporate world and somebody who is ingrained in the freelance world. And we're trying to find out the pros and the cons and what the differences are. So what I want to start with is to ask each of you where you are in your iOS career and how you got there so far. So, Bhagat, let's start with you on that one.
I started out iOS when Swift came out, basically. I was in my college back then. I guess it was my sophomore year. And I was exploring iOS, and Objective-C seemed pretty daunting. And exactly the same year, Swift came out, right? So I thought that everyone's gonna start from the same starting line. So why not start now, right? So I got into it. You just learned from YouTube, free YouTube tutorials on how to make apps. RayVentlic.com, or now known as Kodeco, was a great inspiration then as well. Then luckily I got an internship at an organization. They were building out their app from scratch. I had a mentor there who guided me into like how to do stuff, how like the do's and don'ts of the iOS and all of that. I joined that company after that, and now, yep. So yeah, 5 years into iOS as my day job now.
Mikaela, how about you?
So I started iOS Dev in 2019. I started learning. So I previously went to college at Purdue University and studied like mechanical and electrical engineering. So I did not study computer science or like CS, but I did end up getting a minor in what's called like computer information technology. So it's kind of close to CS, but it's like also not CS. But I just did a minor, so that just meant I got to pick and choose the classes I wanted to take. So I took all the coding classes and did not take the like system design, UML kind of classes, because those were not as interesting. So I did like a little bit of coding in college, but then it wasn't until 2019 that I actually started learning iOS development, which coincidentally is when Swift UI dropped. But it was funny because I was so new, I didn't know it was like a big thing. So like Swift UI drops and I'm watching the keynote and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Not like, oh my gosh, this is like life changing for like iOS dev. It was funny. I like didn't realize that that's what was like happening at the time just because of how new I was. So at the first I did start like with UIKit and started learning iOS dev. And that was mostly through like online tutorials. I used Code with Chris and some Kodeco, Ray Wunderlich at the time. all those kind of like tutorials all online, Sean Allen, and just like various other mainly video tutorials, just because I like watching videos more so than reading books and everything. So I learned through that mostly for iOS dev, and then later started applying for jobs and landed my first iOS dev job in the beginning of 2021. And then I had now two iOS dev jobs, but then more recently I have gone fully indie developer and like fully freelance. So I took like the leap to quit my job, and now technically I'm unemployed, if you want to call it that.
No, a software
Wow.
engineer is never unemployed. A software engineer is currently working on proofs of concept.
Yep, exactly.
I have a
So,
degree in CI, computer information technology as well, so I'm familiar with that.
Yep, it was CIT.
yeah, but that UML will come to bite you if anybody ever asks you to do architecture stuff.
Mhm. We'll get there. I'll learn it when I get there.
so so basically we're gonna play this as Mikaela is the freelance and Bhagat is our corporate. We're not playing against each other. I know that it's day in the life corporate v freelance, but we're not actually going to make this a competition or anything like that. But we are going to be looking for pros and cons. So, Mikaela, we'll start with you on this one. On a day that you're working, what does it look like?
So not the day that I decide to go snowboarding all day and then do 2 hours of work. I have done that, but on a day that I'm working, I attempt to keep somewhat of a routine, because at the moment I quit my job in December, so it's still like very new at the moment for me. So I'm attempting to keep somewhat of a work 9 to 5-ish hours, because that just makes it easier to actually get stuff done. Otherwise, you end up doing things at like randomly at midnight, and then if you get stuck, you kind of can't ask for help. But what I do is generally keep some kind of routine and attempt to prioritize throughout the day of what I actually need to get done. So, you wake up in the morning at a corporate job sometimes and you have like a very specific thing or specific ticket that you're working on. I generally like some of my freelance projects have specific tickets, some of them kind of don't, and it's more of an idea of what we need to finish, like a very bigger, broader idea. But because of that, it then makes it harder, and you have to break down what you are working on. But then again, you are responsible for doing that breakdown too. So I'll try to break down like the week generally. Okay, this is what we have to get done throughout the week. This is the task. Okay, now what do I do today? So I have to wake up and then figure out, okay, now break that big weekly task down and break it down even further just for that day and figure out, okay, this is today. This is how many hours I plan on working. What do I get done in those many hours? Is kind of like, it's all very abstract, but like that is what you have to do, is figure out like, okay, this is actually what I need to work on for a specific client.
Bhagat, how is your day?
Right. I have my weekdays pretty fixed because my workplace right now, it's not remote and it's not hybrid for some teams as well. So I go to the office almost 5 days a week, start my day at around, let's say, 10, reach the office at around 11. That way it's kind of nice. There's no come in or come out kind of a thing. You can come in anytime you want, finish your work, get your work done, go out anytime you want. Most of the work there looks like meetings. You write some code, you get into discussions, have some food with your colleagues, all of that. Then I get back home, try to get some workout and do some cooking myself if the time is there. And yeah, that's about it.
Nice.
Oh,
So I'm hearing that one of the big differences between you is meetings.
Right.
sorry, I'm
Jennifer, you were going to
snickering.
say Jennifer, you were going to say something?
How do you handle it when you need to meet with a client? Do you meet with them from home?
Yeah, generally I use a software called Tuple. It's a pair programming software, and it's super nice because I'll meet with the client and then we can very easily share our screen like you can on Zoom. But what's even better is you can also control the other person's screen. So like the client could have the project up on their side, and I can literally then like highlight on their screen, type, and like we can go like basically into a full pair programming session if that's like what we're working on. And that I think is super nice and really easy to like just like get working on something and discuss something like in a very, very technical terms. But then other times it'll just be like a basic Zoom meeting of it's more of like your weekly sync kind of meeting too.
Wow. And for Bhagat, if you can go in the office on your own schedule, how do they schedule meetings with that? Do you have to tell them ahead of time when you plan to be there, or how do they stay in sync if you can choose your own working hours?
Right. So our workplace has a concept called overlap time. So it's a fixed number of hours in the day. Let's say 10:30 a.m. in the morning to 4 p.m. in the evening. Those are the overlap hours for everyone that everyone has to work out. And most of the meetings, in fact, all of the meetings are scheduled in that time frame. So yeah, so everybody is working in the overlap time, so you don't have issues for scheduling.
Bhagat, are most of the people you're working with in the same time zone?
Yes, since I go to the office, I think everybody that I work with is literally in the office with me. Yeah.
So you don't have remote workers on your team or anything like that?
We don't have remote workers on our team, but we do have another office in another city, or like right here in India. So since the time zone is same, the overlap time is also same, and we managed to schedule all the meetings in that time.
Yeah, because I'm corporate and we have a very large percentage of our team based on the East Coast of the United States and a very
Right,
large portion of our team based on the West Coast of the United States. So
right,
that overlap time kind of stretches into later hours rather than earlier hours, because if you come in early, then the West Coast team is not in at the moment.
right, right.
I was just going to say, Mikaela, you're in the exact opposite. Do you ever go into a co-work place, or are you always out on your own in your own places?
I will sometimes go into co-working places. It's generally more I work at home just because I have my nice office setup. I have my keyboard, mouse, external monitor, all the lovely things of being a software dev is at home. So like I will go out to like co-working spaces here and there a little bit, but so far personally, I've been doing a lot of travel. So because of that, I'm naturally just going to a coffee shop for something. So then I take some of my desk setup with me. So like I'll have my uh like monitor stand, I have an external keyboard, mouse, and I'll have like all of that sitting like at a coffee shop too. But yeah, it is nice to change up your environment because it really helps with like focus. Because sometimes you're at home, like my desk is in my bedroom. So because of that, I'm like, oh, my bed is, 2 feet away. I could just like walk over and take a nap, which is possible. But then you're like, oh no, I got nothing done throughout the day.
Jen, you were asking?
Yeah, but God, do you find that being in the office, I used to work in an office 9 to 5. Do you
Right.
find that being in an office with overlap time, does that interfere with your ability to get your code work done? Are people, sometimes they would book me so full of meetings or
Mhm.
interruptions that I would struggle to get even 2 or 3 hours of focus, and I would struggle to get my code done. And some of us would end up working outside of the office more hours than we were salaried for. Do you ever run into that as a problem?
Right. So this started happening a lot when COVID hit and we all were in lockdown. So the boundary between work and life kind of just diminished. Like whoever wanted to ping someone on Slack or Teams or whatever, like would just do even if it's 10 p.m. in the night or whatever, right? So we learned some things from this, and we came out with two things. People block their focus time on their calendars, so everybody is instructed to not block meetings at those hours unless it's unavoidable. Sometimes there's group of people so large in a meeting that you need to have that common time slot, which is understandable. But yeah, otherwise people don't hamper your focus time. Another thing that we came up with was a no meeting day. So every Thursday or every
Mhm.
Wednesday for a week would be a no meeting day, so that there would be no meetings on that day and it would be completely focused time for an engineer.
Yeah, we also have the no meeting day for
Yeah,
being able to drop down and get more focus done.
right.
Um, We usually have them on Fridays, which unfortunately mixes with the sense of senior syndrome where you're like, yeah, but the weekend is coming up. I can't
Right.
focus. So
We
but
usually have it on we usually have it
no,
on Wednesdays. So we have a stand up on Tuesdays and a stand up on Thursdays. So Wednesdays are no meeting day. So you get a lot of work done on Wednesday to give a significant update on Thursday. And yeah, we used to earlier have it on a Friday, which kind of slumped everyone in the team. Like no one was in a working mood on a Friday. So yeah, we moved it to Wednesday then.
so you have stand-ups twice a week?
Yeah, we used to have it thrice a week, but we figured out that twice a week works for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch gears for a second. Mikaela, we mentioned early on that you are a freelance indie developer. Now, freelance and indie are two different terms. Can you give us a bird's eye view of what the difference is between a freelance developer and an indie developer?
Yeah, so for me, freelance is I'm working with some clients, so some person that I met, and I've been very thankful. My clients are amazing. And they've all been people that I have met like personally, or met through somebody. So it's already like a hot lead, so that it's somebody that it's not like a complete stranger, basically. So that makes like being freelance like 1,000 times better. And yeah, it's a client through somebody. I'm doing work for somebody else. So it's similar to a job if you're doing work for somebody else. And then for me, an indie developer is you're working for yourself, building like your own application. So this could be your own SaaS or product. But yeah, right now I'm working on my own iOS app, and that's like my indie developer part.
Okay. So, Bhagat, can you give us a rough idea how big your team is?
Okay, so the immediate team members that I work with, the iOS team is around 7 people, and the Android folks are around 7 people as well. So 15-member mobile team we have, and then so we at PhonePe we work differently for different apps. So PhonePe has multiple apps. So these 15 people work on a different app, and we have around you can say a 30 or a 40 number backend engineer team. So yeah,
Now, when you say there are 7 people on the iOS team, you're just talking
right,
developers, right?
right, yes,
So if you were to take into account product managers, etc.,
right.
how big would you say that team is?
I would say we can add 10 more people probably with design engineers, and you can add product managers, you can add quality assurance engineers, you can add about 10 more people. Yeah.
And this sort of leads me to one of the pros and cons, and that is it is very helpful on the corporate side to say, I don't have to think about this part of the development process, meaning
Right,
the PMs are basically trying to decide with the leads what are the important things to do,
right, right.
and then
So
it gets
uh
passed off. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say that things get prioritized. The product manager, I also have an engineering manager. So they just figure out what the product needs as of this point and what could be shipped till the timeline of the next release. They just figure that out and they pass it down to whoever's going to work on that. You're right. We don't have to think much into what's the priority and what's going to be shipped.
So, Mikaela, I'm going to turn to you now. One of my favorite things about Mikaela is always wearing the hat with the unicorn on it. Mikaela, how do you figuratively deal with all the hats that you're not wearing?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's we have to figure out everything, and whether or not that's like the client figuring out what the priorities are, or it's me figuring out within a specific task how I want to break everything down. It's pretty much a lot of communication. So, like, I think that's one of the biggest things about a freelancer is you have to have good communication, whether it's with the freelance, like written or verbal, like you have to have good communication. Otherwise, you might go start working on something and then suddenly the client's like, that's not what I was asking because you like didn't completely clarify something with that client. So because of that, like you could just get in a situation of where they're like a really bad situation would be like the client being like, oh, I'm not paying for this. I didn't pay you to do that. And then that is like a completely different thing that you like never have to handle in any kind of corporate situation of like the client getting mad at you like that. But that is something that is possible to happen while freelance. Thankfully, it's never happened to me because I would like to say I have good communication, but then also because like clarifying with the client, like, okay, this is what we're working on, like this is what we're trying to accomplish. Like, is this like exactly what we're talking about final deliverables wise as well? Because like the final deliverable could be, oh, make me an iOS app, and it's just like there's kind of a lot of steps in that. So having to fully break down something with the client of like, okay, what do you actually want in this iOS app? And it has to go as granular as, okay, is there an authentication? What authentication? And just really breaking it down with the client of this is what we're actually talking about, which goes further into how you structure just like the freelance clients that you take on. Like, are you just taking on like an hourly project where you're just doing work that they want you to do and you're just like more corporate wise of like, okay, let me just complete these tickets. You know how the app works, like you kind of just slowly get things done. Or is it a completely different structure where you lay out everything from the very beginning to the very end? This is what this project entails, and then come up with a price for that too as well.
Mhm.
So it varies dramatically depending on the client and like literally what your goals are with those clients as well.
In corporate and in freelance, there is the demand of always going for new knowledge. And I'm curious, in each of your cases, how do you keep current, or what do you do to keep learning some of the new information? And I'll stay with you, Mikaela.
For learning new information in Swift, there's always something new. Like I think Swift 5.10 just dropped. So we get all new stuff with that. So for me, I like to keep up with like all different blogs and podcasts of like different topics. And then that really helps with like staying current with like topics in the industry. But then what's super nice is as a freelancer, you are, which also applies for corporate as well, but you're paid to learn things. So if your client wants you to do something that you do not know how to do, you could say, yes, I will do that for you, and learn how to do it in the process of figuring out how to do that thing. Which is completely valid. We're all like learning how to do things. You're not going to know everything. So like you can't always do something for a client where you know exactly how to complete the task. But keeping up with blogs, podcasts, what else is there? Like YouTube videos, like all sorts of stuff. Being on social media, like I'm on all the social medias, which I wouldn't recommend. I would say probably say like choose a couple, but don't do what I do, which is have all of them. But like Twitter, Threads, Mastodon, like all the things. People talk about things that are new and then they start trending. So seeing what is going on there. But then like that's like keeping up with the industry, but then also super nice being a freelancer. You just get paid to learn new things too.
Thank you. Bhagat?
So the way I see it, so there are two sides of this coin. The first one are features in iOS that benefit the product, right? Such that, for example, live activities for e-commerce, right? Or you can say something like an app clip, right? That would benefit the product, that would increase numbers and all of that. I would say those things come up on a higher priority list, and engineers are free to, especially in my org, engineers are free to propose what they want to implement in their app. They fire up a proposal and it gets through the engineering manager. And my engineering manager is very good. So he just tells us to do whatever we want to do. Like we can go crazy on the app, have Siri shortcuts, have live activities, all of that, right? Then the other side of the coin is some things like only the developers know about. For example, moving all of your completion handlers to async await, right? That wouldn't come up very high into products priority lists. So that's where you take kind of a setback where where you choose your battle very wisely. You just try and propose something to all of your fellow engineers that see now we need to move to an async await kind of a thing. Then all of you try to slowly migrate your completion handler functions to async await along with the product tasks, right? So I would say things like this take time, but some things that come with product, for example, an app clip that can boost app installs, that would take a higher priority and precedence over something like this.
Bhagat, I don't know if you can answer this, but your product, is it
Right.
currently on the latest OS, or does it have to serve many OSs going backwards?
Right. So we support minimum iOS 14.
And we're
So
on
kind of in the
17
Swift
now.
UI territory. Right. Right.
And I guess, Mikaela, from an indie point of view, you can support whatever OS you want.
Yes, which is super nice. So I'm building an app right now and it's iOS 17, but then of course like iOS 18 is right around the corner. So it's going to be released for 17 soon, but then I could just decide, hey, let me just bump it to 18 because I can. Even if like you lose users, it's an indie app, so unless you like hit it big from the very beginning, like you're not really going to leave that many people behind.
Right. I think
Okay.
I think it might work for an indie app, but not for a freelance client as well, right? They might also ask you to keep a minimum version support, right?
Yeah, it's actually super nice. Me personally, the two clients that I have are iOS 17 minimum for both of them. So that is
Right.
super nice. But previously, because I've been working on this project for a while, it was iOS 14, and then we've slowly bumped it up basically as the years go on because of the client and the application that he's making. Like, it's part of like a company sort of. So because of that, they like are required to bump the version of their iPads and iPhones and stuff. So because of that, we can just bump the app version as well too, just because like the
Right.
company is already requiring them to update. So we just are naturally upgrading the Xcode project as well, which is super nice though too.
Right. We were stuck with iOS 10 until last year, uh,
Oh wow.
where yeah,
Ow.
where we yeah. So it's kind of a utility app, so you cannot force users to get off of it. So yeah, last year we made a collective call to like bump up the version. So yeah.
One of the things that we deal with in the corporate world is work-life balance.
Right.
And you talked about the fact that initially you would Slack people or ping people at 10 p.m. and then you decided not to. How do you maintain that clear work-life balance? Do you go home and it's done, you don't touch it at all, or do you mix it? Bhagat?
Right. So this is a tricky question because there are days where I would do that, but there are days that I would strictly won't do that. Right. So for example, if you are in the middle of a very big thing that needs to go out, so it's understandable in the team to like just sit and ship it. But there are some things that come up very frequently or not so frequently that you might want to say like I'll just get to it tomorrow, right? And fortunately, my employers are very understanding in that way that right now they don't ping you after like you get to home or after a certain amount of time. You can snooze your Slack notifications outside of the work hours, all of that. So yeah, it's just about drawing a very clear line. Where does this stop? And I think it's pretty generous with all of us here. Yeah.
Now, Mikaela, you mentioned the fact that your work area is right next to your bed.
Mm.
And instead of, I guess, work-life balance for you, how do you manage the life-work balance?
Yeah, it's I would say a little bit more blurred, like for better or worse at the moment, also because I like iOS development, so like I think it's fun anyways, and because of that, I'll end up doing something at like 8 p.m. or sometimes like I will take client calls at like 8 p.m. just because my client is based in now Germany. Previously, it was APAC, like the Asia Pacific region. And so we were like 12 hours apart. So his AM was my PM, but I kind of like to work at night. So then we would have a call, and it actually kind of worked out perfectly when it was like 12 hours apart, just because my night, his day. And then we are like, it's very easy kind of to hop into a call like that, as opposed to when the time zone change is like the person is 6 to 8 hours ahead of you. It's far enough that like it's very hard to like schedule things here and there. So because of that, I balance things as in attempting to prioritize, I would say would be the best way, because I'm still like working on it. And that's something that I've released recently as a blog post series where I'm going to write like a monthly retrospective of like what I've worked on and how I felt like about that work of like, oh, I did pretty good this month, or like something happens that's like, okay, this month was absolutely useless. I kind of got nothing done. So because of that, it's just The hard thing is just prioritizing, I would say, of picking like what are the tasks you have to work on, what like is things you must complete. So like if you must complete something, well, if you didn't do anything throughout your 9 to 5 because I decided to go snowboarding all day, okay, that means am I going to be doing this tonight when I'm tired after snowboarding? Or does that mean I'm going to go to bed early and work on it the next day?
I can really relate to what Mikaela is saying, and also being a night person. And I'm the same way. I find sometimes during daylight hours, I cannot focus in a chair and I need to be active. And I'm always on the fence of should I work at night? Should I work during the day? What are my priorities? But God, I'd like to ask in the corporate setting, what do people who are night owls do? I know that not everyone has their productive periods during the day. Do you have anyone on your team, or have you ever experienced that where people prefer to work at night? Is the corporate able to accommodate that?
I am myself a night owl, and I cannot put some focus in the day, and especially while I'm in office. So what I try to do is I tend to finish all of my discussions, my meetings, and my know-hows and my how-tos in my daytime. Since that's when I'm the most collaborative, I have most of the people around me. So I find it very quick to just go on their desk and block some time with them, finish it up during the day. And yeah, I try to get some coding hours in the day as well. But night is when I feel the most productive. So it's about getting the task done in within a certain deadline. I think nobody's going to question whether it happened during the day or the night, right? So you just say out your timelines. For example, I'm going to build a search screen. It's going to take me a week, right? Nobody's going to bother you for that whole week, and they're going to understand if something came up during that week. Like, why wasn't it done? It like something came up. Okay, I need 2 more days. Okay, done, right? So it's about communication along with that, but nobody's going to bother you until you say like a week is done. So yeah.
So one of the things that happens, at least to me in the corporate world, is there's a lack of freedom for things like conferences. Bhagat, do you get out to any conferences? Do you have to take time off from work, or do they allow you to go to conferences? How does that work for you?
I go out to conferences. My experience has been pretty good with my employer. They don't, so they believe that the more an engineer learns, the better they're gonna perform and the better return they're gonna get on their apps, right? It's kind of like that. So I've never seen anyone getting stopped from going to a conference or foreign learning experience for that matter, right? So people are free to get books up till like we have a corporate budget for that for the whole team. You're free to get something that enhances your knowledge, enhances your learning, and at the same time helps you in the day-to-day work that you do. So, for example, if you're gonna get a Kodeco book, right, you're gonna bill it off the corporate allowance for learning, right? So anybody can do that. It's just a matter of raising an invoice or something. So yeah, it's pretty flexible that way. Yeah.
And that leads me to a question for Mikaela. I also get some sponsorship from my employer. If you want to attend a conference or learn a new course, do any of your clients sponsor that for you, or do you have to pay out of pocket for all of that?
I would say in a way, it's like through sponsor through a client just because they're already paying me to do work. So then that's the money that I then have, and then that's the money I take and then we'll use for a conference. So it's like inadvertently sponsored by clients, but generally it's kind of directly out of pocket for me of I decide, okay, should I go to this conference? How much does it cost to fly there? What is accommodation? How much food would be? Estimate all of that and then be like, okay, is this conference worth it for me to go to from just a purely like financial point? Because then you also think of the flying as well of, oh, I've got to fly over there. What happens if the flight gets delayed? Am I losing that much time in like, are my deadlines flexible enough that like my client's like, oh, you can just take off to go do this. Hey, I'm going to be out the entire next week. Like, I'm not going to be doing any work. Like, I'll call you back basically after that week. So then that goes back into like communication too with the client about the deadlines that they have and what they want to get done as well. Because that's, I think, the hardest thing about freelance work versus like any kind of corporate is that like, when do you take vacation? Because you have deadlines with your client. And if you're doing all the work, that means you're doing all the work. And so you have to then figure out, okay, what happens if I get sick? Like, how do you communicate that? Like, what gets done? Does everything like cease to get done? How does all that go into play, basically?
Mikaela, I want to stay with you because you said something about how the money comes from the contract, and then you decide the money goes to this for a conference. Do you actually have anything like an LLC or a business to keep personal separate from business
Uh,
funding, or do you basically just sort of keep it all in your head?
I have what's called a single member LLC. So this is basically an LLC company that's just owned by one person, and one person is the one who's controlling all of that. It's technically what's called like a pass-through entity. So in reality, like taxes, United States do not take tax advice from me, but this is what I have set up, is that um, it's a pass-through entity, meaning I'm still taxed like as an individual, and it's really not separate on taxes. But what you do as a single member LLC is that like it's kind of like an extra form that is attached to your taxes. That is like all business related stuff. But like legally, it's you're two separate things where if I get sued, they can sue my LLC. They cannot sue me personally.
Yeah, I got to the point on my indie project where I said I've got to keep my funding and funds for the project separate from my personal funds. And yeah, it gives you that distance of they can sue you for the company
Mhm.
and they can't sue you. It's daunting. And again, we're not giving any legal or financial advice here. About the only thing I can give you advice wise is get an accountant or get a lawyer and have them answer the questions for you so that you know what you're doing. But God, I guess in your world it's much simpler that you get paid and that's your money, and you're
Yeah,
done.
you do whatever you want to do with it. Yeah.
So both of you are very active in different ways in iOS community work. Bhagat, you have done a lot with Kodeco and the boot camps. Mikaela, I could spend 15 minutes doing a litany of what you've done. How important is this engagement for your career, and how do you approach that engagement? Bhagat, let's start with you on this one.
Right. So I feel that at the end of the day, whether you're working in a corporate or working as a freelancer, working as an indie, the goal at the end of the day is to learn more, right? I believe that you learn more by, of course, there are online resources on everything, and whatever I type into Google, I'll get an article on it and all of that. But I feel that you learn from experiences of people more than you learn from stuff online. So that's why I ask all my friends, ask all my colleagues, and me myself, like head out to meetups, meet new people, ask them like what are they working on, see if you can collaborate. You'll find interesting challenges there. You'll find some problems there. You'll learn more. So yeah, I think all of that plus, as you mentioned, boot camps, right? And the amazing Kodeco contributor community. So by collaborating with all of these people, by let's say editing an article or mentoring a boot camp, by collaborating with all of those people, you get to learn something new every day, which you might or might not have missed. So there are so many things that I have learned from my boot camp students that they would ask me up in the happy hours or in a separate session that I wouldn't come across if I wasn't to mentor the boot camp, right? So it's about maintaining that balance, like you're learning also and you're working also. So learning kind of lets off of pace. It's just very good to keep up to it by doing all of this.
And Mikaela, what would you say is the importance of this community and your outreach?
So I really like the importance of like community and everything for me is at first I just wanted to be able to get a job and never have to apply to anything. So because of that, that naturally led to me like talking in forums and like learning online and like collaborating with others because the best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. And sometimes the best person to teach you something is somebody who just learned something. So like I remember when I was learning closures, somebody taught me And then like later on, I met this person like finally at a conference, but like they were the first person to teach me closures. And it's because they had just learned how to closures work themselves. And that is, I think, like super helpful. So for me, at first it was like I just wanted to talk to other people too who did iOS development, because where I live in Indiana, there's not people who do much iOS dev around here, or I like never found it sort of. So because that, especially in the pandemic, that naturally leads like to everybody talking online. And then like Clubhouse was really popular, and like I ended up talking on Clubhouse with a bunch of people. And then that's actually how I ended up finding like the employer that I had for the past like 2 years, was through Clubhouse and then through Twitter. And then I ended up applying when they had an open role. And because of that, they like kind of knew me. They were like, oh yeah, that's the person who we talked to on Clubhouse that has a unicorn as their profile picture. Like it's like it naturally led that way, just because I wanted to chat with other people about what I was learning and like learn new things from others as well. So that just all naturally led into like, I think this is fun to chat with other people about this, which is also one reason why I really like iOS Dev Happy Hour, is because you just get to chat with other people about iOS Dev, and you can talk like in technical terms, and like people know what the question is when they say like, what's the difference between Swift UI and UI Kit, and like you can have a conversation about that. Versus like some people in your everyday life, like you may not be able to talk about those kind of things, and it's like you're just bubbling with information that you just want to chat with others about, like in technical terms. And you sometimes just can't do that. So then that's fun chatting on social media for that way of like partially learning, and then partially like you never know who you're going to meet, and that person like may have a job opportunity for you down the line, or they may then be like a freelance client right down the line, and like you don't know if you don't try.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Bhagat, in the corporate world, you have a hierarchy. There's a junior developer, senior developer, etc. So there's room for growth. And how does that affect the way you work? Or is it something that you put on the back burner and don't think about and hope they'll just sort of notice you? I mean, how does the whole system work in your head?
Okay, for me, I've always worked at organizations which had a flat hierarchy model. So it was something like, you're an engineer, I'm an engineer, let's do something, right? It was never like, you're a senior engineer, I'm a junior engineer, I'll have to ask you this, right? It was always about collaboration at the places I've worked at and the place I'm working in right now. So the key difference between what you can assume as a senior engineer or what you can assume as a junior engineer come up with the roles and responsibilities. And sometimes it's the people with less number of experience taking up more responsibility. Let's say someone who has a higher number of experience takes up critical responsibilities. For example, they'll just release an app on every Monday, right? Now, that's something that you cannot trust an unexperienced person to do. You have to do app store stuff and all of that, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand. So yeah, I've never experienced something like a senior engineer and a junior engineer. I've always reached out to people for help who I think might have a better context on this or have a better context on a particular topic. And I've been reached out by other people who think I might have a better context on this topic, right? So it just plays very well for collaboration.
Have you been promoted within your own company?
No. So as I said, everybody's an engineer. So they don't do titles.
Okay.
Everybody's a software engineer, but yeah, you get a performance review every year.
I was in a flat hierarchy. Who does the pull request?
So it's as I said, it's about collaboration. So for example, if two people are working on the same thing, one would raise a pull request and the other one would approve it, and then the other person who doesn't have some context on it sees it through a third person's eyes and then approves it. So you have two people approving a pull request and then it gets merged. The first review is for the person who has context on the same thing, so that they don't mess up the business logic and it works the way it's supposed to. The second reviewer guarantees that when they view the pull request, they are an outsider, right? So they focus more on architectural guidelines and language guidelines, coding practices, and all of that. So yeah.
Mikaela, who can you go to for help if you don't have a team?
Yeah, generally I'll probably just go to social media a lot of times. Like if you actually look at my Twitter profile, it's actually a lot of questions, and it's usually me asking people, "Hey, so in this situation, what would you do?" So it's not like directly tied to like the project or anything that I'm working on, but more of like, "Oh, if you are currently working with some backend custom API, how would you want to do this thing?" So it's talking more generally. So I'll like generally ask on social media or just like text like specific friends that I have who are also like iOS developers being like, "Hey, you free? Want to do like a quick like pair program?" And then just like actually chat with like other friends. And then so it is collaborative in that way of like I'll chat with other friends like about iOS development. And sometimes it'll be very specific about like an actual problem that I'm working on with a client. Otherwise, then you kind of get into Slack and Discord groups as well. You can always ask questions. A lot of Swift iOS dev focus groups have some kind of code help section. So it's people being like, "Hey, I'm working on a project. How do I do this?" But like basically it's I can collaborate with like anybody who's on social media really, which is kind of nice. But the thing that I do miss about like being in a 9 to 5 sort of job is being able to like tap somebody on the shoulder who already has all the context about what you're working on. And just being like, "Hey, I'm really stuck on this very specific thing. Can you help?" And they can immediately dive in. Versus when you explain something on social media, you then have to break it down of like, okay, this is like the actual problem, conceptual problem that I'm working on, but not the in-depth, this is exactly the code for this project. It's more about like, this is conceptually the issue that I'm having, and then going kind of from there.
Are either of you using Stack Overflow anymore?
I've never used Stack Overflow, as in I've never asked a question because I'm scared to ask a question on Stack Overflow because I don't want people like saying, "Oh, this is stupid. Why did you even ask that?" Because I think that is a thing that can happen. So I generally don't use Stack Overflow. I have answered one question on Stack Overflow, and that is like all of my, what do they call it? Is it called karma or all your points? Like
Karma, all
all of
your
my,
points.
yeah, all of mine come from a single question that I've or that I answered, which was like about Swift UI, when like with previews or something with the new macros. Um, but for me, yes, I never used Stack Overflow in that way. I just like mainly would Google a lot of things. Nowadays with AI and ChatGPT and everything, I sometimes do. I don't have a ton of luck with ChatGPT just because like I don't know, maybe it's the questions or how I ask them, but it always gives me a wrong answer because I like know it's incorrect. I'll say it's wrong and ask for a new answer, so it gives me a new wrong answer. And then when I tell it that's wrong, it goes back to the first wrong answer, and then it's just like a cycle of like stuff that is not helpful to me. So then I'll try to use also like Copilot, which is more of like inside of VS Code as opposed to being in Xcode. But again, it kind of helps, it kind of doesn't. Like sometimes it'll give me good information, but if I'm working with something like brand new like Vision OS, it can't help me at all.
Yeah, I use ChatGPT for asking about conceptual things like how do closures work, for example, or which Swift UI view will do this for me. I don't ask it for code snippets or anything like that. And yeah, because ChatGPT is a year and a half out of date, it can't handle pretty much most of the latest Swift UI and Vision OS. Bhagat, do you use Stack Overflow?
In fact, yes, I do. I try to ask questions when I'm stuck, and as Mikaela said, ChatGPT doesn't help. So I ask real, I ask real people solutions to problems. I also post them on Twitter sometimes, but mostly I try to stick to Stack Overflow.
Okay, so I'm going to counterpoint it now and say, Bhagat, is there anything about the indie lifestyle that you wish was more part of your corporate day?
Apart from, I would say getting more time to build my own apps. Uh, that's one thing I would like to incorporate in my day. Yeah.
And Mikaela, similar question to you. Is there something that came from the corporate world that you still wish you had in your indie lifestyle?
I think because there's not many for me, which is why I decided to take this leap. Um, it is just nice collaborating with others. So I have hired like subcontractors here and there, but a lot of that is me explaining to them how to do something. So like chatting with others in that way, because if you only work for like some clients, um, and maybe it's a problem that you do know how to solve, you're kind of just like very siloed working on your own for a very long time. So maybe that's why I like talking on social media so much, is because otherwise all I do is sit in front of a computer and that's it. Um, so that like collaborative aspect is super nice in a corporate, especially like Bagat, when you're in office with others, you just actually get to chat with everybody versus like
Right.
in a coffee shop is nice, but again, that's just people around you. It's not really like people that you're gonna collaborate and talk with like very in depth about some topics here and there. And also
Right.
expenses. Like I have to handle all the admin and all the like, finance of everything. That's something that you literally just don't have to handle at all with within a corporate aspect.
Right.
Now, I'd ask if there's ever the worry about where the money is going to come from, but I know from being both on the indie side and the corporate side, you will always hit dry times, and in the corporate side, you never know when they're going to say, "Well, it's been nice having you. Bye bye." Um, so there's there's very little to go there. Um, how do you see corporate and iOS, and I'll talk to each of you on this, corporate and indie, how do you see it developing in the next 5 to 10 years? Mikaela, let's stay with you. How do you see indie development developing?
Ooh, I have a theory on this. I think it'd be interesting to see it play out. I don't usually speculate on anything because I'm usually always wrong. But here's my theory that may possibly in the future be wrong. Is like for indie developers right now, I think Vision OS is a really interesting platform that maybe indies could be the ones who take over everything because you have big corporations uh like Netflix and like YouTube that are deciding actively not to invest on Vision OS from the beginning just because all sorts of reasons. Their code base is, millions, billions of lines. They don't want to like invest in this new platform that nobody knows about. So because of that, a lot of indie developers have kind of like picked up the slack and can build those like smaller, more focused applications that do something that one of the big corporations can't. Like Christian Selig made Juno, which is a YouTube player inside of Vision OS, and he has already paid back his Vision Pro that he bought, which is like $4,000, and that was within like the first couple days or so. And that is an indie dev who decided to make an app that a big corporation didn't. So maybe then indie developer for Vision OS could maybe like flourish more. I think that would be really cool to see something like that, just because like big corporations, one of the um, one of the issues about them is they move so slow. So because of that, indie developers can move fast, like literally build something. I built my Vision OS app from like Sunday to Thursday, which was very fast and very stressful. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can move pretty quickly. So in that way, it's like indie devs could pick up the slack on Vision OS, but then also you can kind of just do a lot of things that you want to do. So you can build whatever you feel like building. If you're wanting to build a brand new to-do app, even though there's a million out there, you can, and that could be the one that hits for somebody else. And that then just makes it so that you live and right off into the sunset with your like to-do app. So I think indie dev could like, there's always a place for it. And there's always like different little niches that an indie dev can just pick up the slack and get like that 1% of the market, but that 1% of the market happens to be thousands of dollars.
Mhm. Bhagat, how do you see the corporate world developing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, I see it going differently than the way it currently is, primarily because of introduction of LLMs into our lives. I feel, as you said, ChatGPT doesn't give coding snippets or probably correct answers yet, but I see that 5 years down the line, probably 10 years down the line, it's going to do that, right? And I feel even when I say 10 years, I may be overestimating it, but I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a huge paradigm shift in how we code in our corporate lives. Of course, that depends on how strict corporates are to allow their employees to uh, harness the power of AI. But yeah, I think sooner or later, it's the AI is going to take over. Not
Mm.
not in the sense that it's going to take over a job, but it's gonna help you so much so that you just give it the right prompt and it gets the work done for you. Yeah.
You will make Susanna Skyer-Gupta very happy with that answer.
Right.
My co-host is very pro AI. My other co-host, I'm not the
She's evolving into an AI expert, and she's secretly taking me with her. I'm falling in love with AI. And one question I had for Mikaela, do you have any AI tools that help you? Because I know with my job, I have to do a mixture of administrative tasks along with code. For me, that's very difficult to do both. And I'm hoping AI will help me with some of these administrative tasks. Do you incorporate AI as an assistant to help you with tasks that aren't code related?
Not at the moment, really. I think it is super useful for like when I post on social media, it's I actually haven't posted any of these posts yet, but I got like 100 different iOS dev topics to talk about on social media because sometimes I'm just like, what do I talk about? So with that, it's like AI is very good at generating topics about something. So like iOS dev, things that I don't even think about of like, oh, how do you get started? Okay, what do you need? You need a Mac, you need Xcode. Okay, how do you download Xcode? Like those are things that I kind of don't think about anymore just because I've done it like I've done those like very simple, like very beginner things. So I don't think of like that as, oh, that's a really good social media topic that I use that I can talk about on social media. So because of that, I've used AI to like generate topics to talk about, but I haven't really posted any of those yet. And I haven't used any AI with like personal finance, some things here and there, as in like categorizing my finances. I just use Zero and they do like at the moment I just use Zero and they just do like basic rules of, oh, if this transaction comes in from this vendor, mark it as this, which I mean essentially is AI very dumbed down, but uh that is just like the basics of what I've used so far is really just like smaller generation of ideas more so than like very in-depth, I would say any other sort of ways.
Okay, so just got a couple of more sort of pointed questions. One of which is open source. Now, corporate will often take an interesting stance on open source code. Bhagat, how does that work in your community, in your corporate world?
Right. So we actually open sourced like our organization constantly open sources stuff that they feel that might be useful for other people out there. Uh, it's particularly related to something that the organization already has in the tech stack. For example, if your backend tech stack is in Java, uh, you're going to be open sourcing more Java libraries for people to use. So it's kind of narrow-sighted with respect to what you can open source and what you cannot. Some things you cannot, and some things are great candidates to open source. There also comes a point on maintainability of that. So once you open source something, then it becomes your responsibility to maintain because someone else's code base could be dependent on it. Then you got to decide whether it's good, whether you're going to take a good for the world approach to maintain it or good for your organization approach to maintain it, right? For example, you release out patches when and whenever your organization feels like, or you have a scheduled timeline so that you cater to the world and you're good for them, right? Some things, some patches are not fit to go out in the world as well. For example, if you're patching an internal security bug or something like that, that might leak sensitive information outside. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the candidates have the open source candidates have to be chosen very wisely. How you do it has to be chosen very wisely. The approach you take also has to be done very wisely. Yeah.
What about consumption of open source, using it in the project?
Right. So I don't think that's a problem at my organization. We use a lot of open source libraries to make our lives easier. Uh, for example, I wouldn't write the image download and cache library when I can just pick one out of the thousands available, right?
Mhm.
So it's just a it's just an engineering call that you take. Uh, for example, if you're going to build a framework down the line that mimics an open source framework, so you just get the open source framework for now, and then when you build out your own, because of some complexities or some things that the open source framework doesn't do, or whatever XYZ reason may be, uh, then you pick out that one and you swap it out with your own, right? So for using open source libraries, there's no such restriction. Yeah.
Okay. Mikaela, what is your interaction with open source, both as contributing and absorbing into projects?
I would say first absorbing into projects, it's dependent on the client of explaining sometimes, depending on how technical your client is, explaining the pros and cons of that library. So very similar to what Bhagat said of it's just an engineering choice of, okay, should we use Firebase? What does Firebase give us that a fully custom backend won't or doesn't? And then just going through that process as well for consuming something, which is, I'd say, pretty much the exact same thing of just picking, do we want to use it? Do we not? What's the pros and cons of it? Usually, though, with I would say client projects, the skill that I've done, which is just very solo and smaller code bases, it's easier to use some kind of open source package as opposed to building something yourself, just because like caching network requests is a lot of work versus just grabbing an open source framework that has already handled all of the different edge cases of being online and offline and changing time zones and stuff like that. But then on the other side, as an indie dev, I can contribute to any open source stuff, which I think is super fun, and you're not restricted in any way of can you work on something else. So because of that, I have like my own open source iOS app that I worked on during Hacktoberfest last year, which Hacktoberfest is put on by DigitalOcean, and it's just like all about getting other people into open source work, which I think is super fun, just because like the world runs off of a lot of open source, but it's so hard sometimes to find maintainers and people who want to contribute to that. So I made like my own open source project, and then by the end of it, I had like 52 people who contributed to this project in a month, which is absolutely wild. How many people that is and how much like code I was reviewing and everything. So with that, that's super fun, and I need to ship that app. So I've been working on doing that because it's kind of just sitting there at the moment. I have like the final touches to do on that to ship it, but hopefully I get that done. I'm sorry to everybody. It's probably not going to happen in March either because I have a super busy month, but before Dub Dub, that's my new deadline. That'll happen. But that's super fun is that like I can just choose to contribute to any open source project, whether that's like get started in the Swift language or contribute to Swift Lint or Swift format, or even maybe the new like pickle language that Apple just released. Like you can contribute to anything that you want. And I think that's like super fun to just get involved in something and then seeing that like what you did impacts or can impact like thousands of other people.
Okay, so I am now going to put both of you somewhat on the spot, and I'm going to say I am a new developer just coming out of college. And I want to know a pro and a con about each of your lifestyles as an indie, freelancer, and as a corporate person. All I want is a pro and a con. And the pros have got to convince me, and the cons have got to be brutal. So let's start with you, Mikaela.
The pro, you can do anything, literally. Like when you just come out of college, you can do whatever you want, which I think is super cool. So you can go work at a corporate job, go work at a freelance, go work at a startup, like you could do anything. The con, if you go do your own thing, you have to also know how to properly manage your time and properly handle your finances, which is something I was not good at when I was just 22 right out of college. So you can learn those things, which lets it so you can do anything, but you have to know how to manage those two things.
Okay, Bhagat, I want, from a corporate point of view, I'm coming out of college. What's a pro and what's a con?
Okay, a very simple pro that I see is that you're going to be financially stable and probably independent like very soon. Uh, I think most college graduates deal with student debt, so I think that provides a safe way for them to just get rid of that. A con would be, as Mikaela mentioned in the pro, you cannot just do anything that you want. You gotta be restricted by some people, timelines, stuff, processes that you're not aware of. So yeah, that's a con, I would say.
I had a feeling it was going to come down to stability of money and freedom of engineering. I really, and I think both of you went in exactly that direction of your pros and your cons. That's wonderful.
Uh,
Let's go ahead, Jen.
Are there other options? Because for me, I'm in a different world because I'm from academia. So I'm kind of a hybrid. I do some work in person and in the office, and I do a lot of work in my home office. Can you strike a balance and have both? Or is there different kinds of developers besides just freelancers? There's some people who maybe do some of each.
You can definitely do some of each. That's what I've done throughout like my whole career so far is that I've had a 9 to 5 job and then did iOS dev, like building my own indie app on the side outside of work. So like you do get those two parts of it. I think you sometimes get to a point of if you do corporate coding and then also want to do your own coding outside of work, it's a lot of thinking. And so you then don't want to do your own things outside of work because you're already tired of doing all your thinking at your job that you don't want to do more in-depth, very hard thinking outside of work. So for like software engineering, I think that can happen very quickly and then you like lead to burnout very quickly just because like software engineering is a lot of hard thinking that you just sometimes don't want to do that outside of work too.
Yeah, I have to admit, being a corporate Monday through Friday and an indie on a weekend indie, it can be very, very tiring. But Jennifer did raise a very relevant thing. We've talked about indie and freelance and corporate, but there's also academia. And I know, Jen, you also do boot camps for Kodeco, right?
Yes, and I've done some contracting as well. So, and I've known a lot of people in the field who do some contracting as well as their freelance or corporate careers.
Mm-hmm. So let's back away from computers for a moment. And I'm going to start with Bhagat. Uh, we know that you do your 9 to 5, and you or in your case 10:30 to a little later. What do you do when you're not on the keyboard? What is something that is non-tech for you that you enjoy doing?
Uh, One thing that I enjoy is just meeting up with my friends, and we always find some new places to eat around town. So that is one thing that I like to do. The other thing is I'm kind of into music, so whenever I get time, I just learn how to create music or how to mix music, kind of like a DJing kind of a thing. So yeah, that's my venting out point where I just do whatever I can do whatever I can for the amount of time I need to. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And Mikaela, dare I ask, other than snowboarding,
Oh, I can't say snowboarding. That's not allowed. I
you've
didn't hear this
already
rule.
you've already said snowboarding a few times, so I figure we'll see. Well, what else is in the non-tech world of Mikaela?
I would say, yeah, snowboarding is super fun, but then also kind of like Bagat, just hanging out with friends and just talking about something that's just non-tech for a while, just because it's got a lot of stuff to talk about, but it's nice to just talk about something just completely different for a change, just with friends. Um, Hanging out, and then also like doing stuff like just working out, going to the gym, things like that.
See, the question normally is, what do you do when you're not at a keyboard? But in case of Mikaela, I realize that there's the podcast on tech, the social group on tech. So we had to steer that one.
My screen time is like 12 hours.
She might have a keyboard mount for her snowboard.
I do have a travel keyboard and a regular like I have a desk keyboard, and then I also have my travel keyboard.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of the Mac keyboard. Yep. What was Mikaela? Can you hold yours up again?
It's a
Oh,
little
so
teeny
pretty.
tiny. It's like the size, like this how big my phone is, so that's how big the keyboard is.
I love it. It's so pretty.
Is that a Razer?
No, it is. Oh, sorry, I think I just hit something. It is the Planck Easy by ZSA, which is the same people who make the Moonlander split mechanical keyboard. So if you go to any of my social links, that's usually the one you see, because that's like my main at my desk kind of keyboard. And then this is like my small travel one. It's smaller than the keyboard like on your MacBook. So it's super nice to like travel with.
Now, I forgot one question. I want to go back to this. But this won't affect you as much because you're in the office. One of the things that's coming up now that we hear a lot in freelance and indie developers is the concept of digital nomad, which is somebody who basically they can be anywhere and still do their work. Mikaela, have you nomaded like this? Have you been in different places to do your work?
Yes, that is sort of like one of my goals of this year is to do a lot more travel. And so it is nice that like being fully remote, I can do that. So it's now March, the entire February, I went to 3 different cities. So I wasn't really somewhere longer than about like a week, which is slightly chaotic. People typically don't do that, but that's what I've done as my travel so far is, yeah, I've been to Denver, Salt Lake City, Cupertino, and then now home. And that's all been in the past month. And it's kind of funny just how it plays out. I'm about to go to all of those places like again this entire next month.
Well, when you're in Denver, I hope you get to snowboard.
Yes, that's what I'll be doing. I can't wait.
Yeah, you'll have to give Jen a call. Jen's Denver based.
Ooh,
Yep, I'm
I
an
didn't know
hour
that.
from Denver. I'm in northern Colorado by Fort Collins.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I sadly won't be there for long. So this entire next month, like, yeah, it's all of my indie dev and freelance is actually about to be sort of put on hold for the next month, because I'm about to go like so many different places. I'm about to like be on 6 different flights, this next month, going to like at least 3 different states. It's about to be very chaotic. But like
Wow.
digital nomad is super fun. Generally, yeah, people don't travel like this chaotically like I do. I just travel via chaos. Like there's a flight I still need to book. And that's in the next, yeah, like 3 weeks. But like being able to travel is super nice. I think the hardest part is really just finding your routine and finding priorities of like, okay, I'm gonna be flying this whole day. What do I need to get done the next day? And then also, if you like then taking a jet lag into account. So because I've been flying so far, mostly in the United States, there's only a 3 hour time difference. And what I've done mainly is stay on Eastern time, because then like you can be done sort of with work early, but then it's the only time I'm ever actually a morning person is when I'm a morning person on the West Coast, not on the East Coast. Um, so yeah, that's nice. And I'll just stay in one time zone and it's not really too difficult. You just kind of eat meals at sort of weird times. But then yeah, flying to like Europe or Asia, those like you kind of can't really stay on Eastern time because the time zone is like so drastic. So in that case, then I would like switch to whichever time zone. But again, it kind of just sort of depends on what the priorities are of like, okay, do I really need to get this thing done at this point in time, or can it wait like for me to go walk around, like, explore wherever you're at and stuff like that.
Our last question has been sort of this theme for the season, and that is the fact that this has been a year filled, well, not just this year, but this whole season, which encompasses the last 6 months, has been filled with strife all over this world. And I'm curious, with all of the news that we get, and as people refer to it, doom scrolling on the internet, where do you find your inner peace and zen? Where do you find your calm comes from, and how do you keep yourself on that level? Bhagat?
Um, I uh, I have to admit I am a doom scroller myself. But yeah, the way I try to control that is I I have set up work profile on my cell phone. So whenever I'm at work, a Siri shortcut is triggered and it automatically puts it into that. I cannot open any of the doom scrolling apps that I would rather, like, for example, if so, corporate projects are big. So, for example, if you're building a project, it would take anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. And with all of this, our attention spans are getting lower and lower. So, the first thing, as you would press a command B, is to grab your phone and just start scrolling, right? So, I have specifically set up some automations on my phone that prohibit me from doing that. Uh, post post my work hours, I've already set up more automations to limit the time that I do scroll some apps. For example, you could be doom scrolling Twitter for hours and not learn anything. But if you follow the right people, you follow the right conversations, you could learn in 10 minutes what you couldn't have learned for example in a day, right? So uh, it's just to strike the balance between who you're following, what conversations you're getting into. Maybe you'll come out learning something new. So in that, if you look at it in that way, it's a really good thing. Probably you're networking with some people, probably you're sharing your app on Twitter, you're replying to people like, hey, I made an app, can you look at it? Or you're just building out in public, all of that. So uh, the key is to strike a balance, to not let yourself flow into the doom scroll, and just making the best out of the powerful network that social media is, right?
Thank you. That's wonderful. I appreciate the concept of limit the doom scroll and find alternatives, and that definitely would make for a better day, a better experience. Mikaela, how do you find your zen through the bad news?
A lot of what I do is try to find something you enjoy. So, like, if that is just watching a TV show that will just take you away, you gotta just be absorbed in that one thing for a little bit. That is generally what I do, is just like finding the one thing that you enjoy and just kind of doing that and taking a step back. Because, like, I regularly use social media in a way that, like, I only follow certain people, or I only like follow people about iOS dev right now, just because, like, that's all I talk about on social media. So like my social media is already curated in that way. The only way I doom scroll is like kind of on Facebook, because it has like the greater people that I've actually like known in life. And but all I see is like a lot of like wedding and baby pictures, sort of like that's all that's on there. So like I don't know, it's I kind of just scroll past a lot of that, or I'll just like see car crash videos because that's what Facebook decided to show me. Um, so like because of that, yeah, it's just like I already like block Facebook. Like I don't ever go onto it on my phone. I should probably delete it. But then taking sort of a step back really from social media as a whole is just finding something that you enjoy and just doing that. So it's like snowboarding, or finding a recipe that I've struggled busting to cook because I'm a terrible cook, but like somewhat maybe figuring it out. But doing something like that, of like you just fully get away from any kind of like doom scrolling things, and it doesn't have to be getting away from a screen. Like I watch like one TV show, and that's like the only TV that I watch just in general. But that one TV show is like I'll block the whole day, not do anything, or not the whole day, but that whole night, block like doing anything productive or doing any kind of work, and just be like, okay, this is my time that I'm gonna sit here, eat mac and cheese, and just watch a TV show.
So what's the TV show of choice right now?
It's NCIS, like in the new one, and it's, which is funny because it's not even like, I don't know, like a comedy or anything, but it's like I've been watching it for like ever. So it's like the main NCIS, and I really like NCIS Hawaii. I don't know. I like crime shows, but those are like the only two. Actually, there is one other.
That's why I laughed. It's like I
It's
just
not even
I get
serious.
away from the noise by watching just
By
simple
watching
TV,
crime.
by watching crime on TV.
Yeah,
I
it's
also
that,
put on crime to relax. It's
that
like,
and
I'll just
then
watch some 2020. Oh, that's great.
yeah,
Yeah,
that and like Law and Order SVU, which is also like not even, it's just like even more serious of a crime, I think, too. But I decided to watch that whole series from the beginning. So
It's a
My
good show,
partner's
in
a
my
true
opinion.
crime fiend, and I can't get into the mindset. It's just like this is stuff that's happened.
yeah, that's what's kind of scary is too. I don't, maybe that's what I like is the fear. But
I like the fear and abnormal psychology because I just can't wrap my head around it. And so I just try to understand it and I can't.
yeah, it's
And that's part of the fun.
yeah, I was watching SVU, and then I was in New York City at the time, and they're like, "Oh yeah, 118th Street is 6th Avenue," and I was like, "That's like 2 blocks away," and that's when I was like, "Oh, maybe I should have watched this."
Well, Mikaela, Bhagat, you've given us great insight into the different lives of being both at corporate and indie. And as somebody who is trying to continually bridge that gap of being a weekly corporate, a weekend indie, it is quite the experience and quite the different worlds. I really want to thank both of you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep, it's a pleasure was mine.
We will be back in another 2 weeks. As I have mentioned on previous shows, we talked about the move from XML to Jetpack Compose, and we will give that same kindness to iOS, talking about moving from UI Kit into Swift UI, and I think that's going to be a great show. But that's going to wrap things up for this episode. Normally, I would just sort of say goodbye and let it trail off, but I'm going to let Mikaela take us out of here because Mikaela is one of the hosts of the iOS Dev Happy Hour, which always closes on a happy note with this following saying. So, Mikaela, take us home.
So everybody, raise whatever drink you have. If you've seen, I drank like water in a clear mug because I like water. So for everybody, may all your pain be champagne, and may all your bills be $100 bills. So cheers to everybody.
And thank you so much. We'll see you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.